When a country knows its value, the world listens. Jaishankar didn't just speak, he delivered a message. India is not the silent partner anymore. This is not about politics. It's about confidence. It's about knowing your worth. And when you know your worth, even the biggest powers pause. True leadership is not about volume. It's about vision and timing. In the world of diplomacy and global influence, what separates an ordinary leader from an exceptional one is not the ability to shout the loudest, but the capacity to see what others don't and act when others won't. Leadership is often misunderstood as the art of commanding attention, being seen, being heard, and being followed. But the most transformative leaders operate with a different philosophy. They understand that sound alone does build empires. Strategic silence, clarity of purpose, and precise execution are the true tools of power. When Jaishankar speaks on a global stage, he does raise his voice. He raises the standard. He doesn't talk over others, he talks through complexity. In his words, there's calculation, confidence, and clarity. He doesn't just respond, he reframes the conversation. That is the power of timing. That is the essence of vision. Real leadership is like playing chess on a global board. Every move must be deliberate. Every word placed with foresight. Jaishanker's statements resonate not because they are loud, but because they are timely. They emerge when the world is either distracted or doubtful, and suddenly, India's position becomes the focal point. That's not accidental. That's vision. Volume has its place in rallies, in protests, in movements that are meant to disrupt. But diplomacy is a different terrain. It's not the disciples that count, but the depth. Vision allows a leader to anticipate the ripple effects of today's statement on tomorrow's policy, on next year's economy, on the decade's balance of power. And timing allows that leader to deliver that statement not when emotions are high, but when minds are open. That's why the greatest global players aren't the ones who shout "look at me," but those who speak when silence has dominated too long. They cut through the noise not by adding more to it, but by offering clarity. Leadership without vision is directionless. It moves, but it doesn't progress. It acts, but it doesn't transform. A visionary leader like Jaishankar doesn't simply defend his country's position. He defines it in a global context. When the world views India through the lens of outdated assumptions, he reshapes that narrative, not with aggression, but with articulation. That is what vision looks like in a century. It's not about proving superiority. It's about presenting sovereignty with sophistication. Timing is often overlooked in the age of instant reaction. In a digital world, the temptation is always to speak first. But real leadership waits. Not out of fear, but out of strength. It calculates the atmosphere, reads the audience, anticipates the counter-arguments, and then strikes not in haste, but with purpose. Jaishankar exemplifies this in his diplomacy. He does take the bait. He does react emotionally. He responds rationally. And he chooses moments that multiply his message's weight. That's the difference between influence and impulse. Vision also allows a leader to choose battles wisely. Not every insult deserves a reply. Not every criticism requires a defense. When you understand where you're going, you don't need to stop at every detour. Jaishankar does try to win headlines. He tries to win strategies. While others are fixated on today's controversy, he's laying down a decade-long framework. That's what leaders with vision do. They look beyond the smoke to see the fire that really matters. And they prepare their people not just to react to today, but to lead tomorrow. It is easy to gather applause by echoing popular sentiment. But real leadership is tested when you must speak an unpopular truth. When you must hold your ground even as pressure mounts. When you must resist the urge to conform. Vision gives a leader the inner compass to do just that. It allows them to say, this is not just what feels good now, this is what will serve us in the long run. Jaishanker's leadership, rooted in such vision, is not reactive, it is proactive. It does chase validation. It commands respect. When the US or other global powers push a narrative, most countries either align or stay silent. But India, under confident and visionary diplomacy, asserts itself with dignity. That shift from passive observer to active global player is not a coincidence. It's the result of leadership that knows when to speak, what to say, and how to say it without shouting. Jaishanker's method is surgical, not theatrical. He doesn't debate for drama. He debates for direction. Volume is temporary. Vision is lasting. The noise of today's news cycle will fade, but the structural changes made by visionary leadership endure. History doesn't remember who shouted the loudest. It remembers who changed the course. In that sense, volume may win moments, but vision wins eras. And the role of timing in that equation cannot be overstated. Knowing when to act is often as critical as knowing how to act. In every major movement, there is a turning point, a moment when the tide shifts. Great leaders don't wait for that moment to arrive by chance. They create it. Through their timing, they shift momentum. Through their vision, they rewrite destiny. That's why true leadership is not about being the center of attention. It's about being the center of gravity. And that gravity doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being right, being clear, and being timely. Jaishanker's global presence shows that a calm voice with a sharp mind can shake the loudest rooms and redirect the biggest conversations. Leadership is also about trust. And trust is built not by volume, but by consistency. Vision gives you consistency because it gives you direction. You are not moved by every wind. You are not derailed by every crisis. Instead, you lead with calm, calculated determination. You don't surprise your people with erratic changes. You guide them with reliable wisdom. And timing ensures that when you act, your actions make an impact not because they are loud, but because they are needed. Confidence is a foundation built not just on words, but on quiet evidence. It is not loud, it is steady. It grows stronger with every decision made without fear, and every stand taken without applause. Jaishanker's confidence isn't a performance. It's the result of internal alignment with a clear purpose. He does not need to doubt himself because he's done the work. Is informed. Is prepared. Is deliberate. That is why when he speaks, it's not with arrogance, but with assurance. Confidence doesn't mean having all the answers, it means being undeterred by the questions. It is rooted in the conviction that your principles are firm, your knowledge is sound, and your direction is justified. People follow confidence, not because it demands followers, but because it reflects strength. Confidence also brings stability. In moments of global tension or geopolitical uncertainty, it's the calm leader who instills calm in others. Panic spreads when leaders panic, but confidence spreads assurance. When Jaishankar faces pressure from international media or policy bodies, he doesn't shift with the winds. He holds his ground with reason. He is not reactive. He is resilient. That's the type of leadership people can count on. And in a world where chaos often gets the spotlight, confidence becomes a rare and powerful force. This confidence is not blind. It's not the loud ego of someone who refuses to listen. It's the quiet strength of someone who knows what matters. It allows him to accept criticism without crumbling, to face opposition without surrendering, and to speak with dignity instead of dominance. Confidence, in its highest form, is not a barrier to learning, but a bridge to greater dialogue. It opens doors instead of closing them, because it's rooted in the understanding that strength and humility are not opposites, they are partners. And in that balance, Jaishanker's voice doesn't just echo in halls of diplomacy, it carries weight. Clarity is the final pillar that makes this kind of leadership so effective. Clarity of thought, clarity of purpose, clarity of message. When a leader knows what they stand for, what they're fighting for, and where they're leading their people, there is no room for confusion. Clarity cuts through noise. It replaces speculation with facts, ambiguity with direction, and chaos with structure. In every speech, every interview, every decision, Jaishankar exhibits this precision. He does waffle. He does hedge. He states. He explains. He anchors the message so firmly that others cannot distort it. A leader with clarity also empowers the nation. People don't just want to follow power, they want to follow a plan. Clarity offers that. It gives the public and the international community a sense of direction. It allows everyone to align, to coordinate, and to anticipate. And in global diplomacy, that kind of predictability isn't weakness, it's influence. Others can count on what India will say and how it will act, because there's clarity in the way the message is shaped and delivered. That clarity also makes debates more productive. When your message is clear, it becomes the center of dialogue rather than the target of distortion. Clarity avoids misinterpretation. It prevents escalation. And most importantly, it builds credibility. In an era where many leaders speak to be heard, Jaishankar speaks to be understood. That difference is why his voice carries farther, even when it's softer. It's not about echo chambers or applause. It's about conviction, consistency, and comprehension. Confidence, when paired with clarity, creates a leadership that is both steady and sharp. It can endure pressure and resist manipulation. It leads by example, not by decree. And it speaks with a tone that says, "We are not here to impress you. We are here to represent ourselves." That tone shifts paradigms. It changes the dynamic from asking for respect to commanding it. It removes the need to explain one's legitimacy, because the message and the way it is delivered speaks louder than any justification ever could. When Jaishankar speaks on a global stage, he does raise his voice. He raises the standard. He doesn't talk over others, he talks through complexity. In his words, there's calculation, confidence, and clarity. He doesn't just respond, he reframes the conversation. That is the power of timing. That is the essence of vision. Real leadership is like playing chess on a global board. Every move must be deliberate. Every word placed with foresight. Jaishanker's statements resonate not because they are loud, but because they are timely. They emerge when the world is either distracted or doubtful, and suddenly, India's position becomes a focal point. That's not accidental. That's vision. Jaishanker's communication isn't reactive. It is intentional. Every time he addresses an international issue, he doesn't merely offer an opinion. He builds a framework. His statements carry the weight of preparation, the precision of facts, and the foresight of strategy. He understands that diplomacy is not a battlefield of volume, but an arena of intellect. In this arena, words must be crafted like instruments, each one chosen not for dramatic effect, but for durable impact. It's not about sounding impressive for the moment, but about constructing an argument that lasts beyond the news cycle. What separates his voice from many others is the refusal to be swayed by provocation. He doesn't respond to every noise, nor does he chase every media moment. Instead, he scans the environment like a strategist measuring global sentiment, anticipating shifts in alliances, and calculating the implications of each phrase he utters. When the United States or Western nations issue statements with an air of dominance or assumption, he doesn't counter with indignation. He counters with structure. He doesn't rush to defend. He calmly repositions the conversation, placing India not as a responder, but as an initiator of its narrative. The brilliance of this approach lies in its restraint. In an age where leaders often scramble to assert themselves at every turn, Jaishankar waits. He listens. He assesses. He understands that not every moment is the right moment to speak, but when he does speak, his voice lands like an anchor in a sea of noise. It brings the discussion back to principle, to clarity, and to balance. That ability to bring calm without losing force, to bring conviction without aggression, is what distinguishes true statesmanship. Timing, in his method, is not merely about patience. It's a strategic tool. He knows that the world pays attention not just to what is said, but to when and how it is said. By choosing moments of silence wisely, he amplifies the moments of speech. When he does speak, the world listens not because he demands attention, but because he has earned credibility. That credibility is rooted not just in knowledge, but in the trust that when he speaks, it matters. That trust is built over time, through consistent, calculated, and principled communication. Consider the global diplomatic landscape, filled with press conferences, sound bites, and emotionally charged commentary. Amidst this chaos, Jaishanker's presence is different measured. composed, and anchored in context. His interviews are not about showing off knowledge, but showing depth of understanding. When journalists attempt to provoke or steer the narrative, he does follow. He guides. He brings them back to the larger picture, reminding everyone that diplomacy is not about short-term popularity, but long-term positioning. His speeches are not reactionary statements, but reflections of a deep internal process of understanding history, analyzing present dynamics, and envisioning the future. That process requires discipline. It demands that ego take a backseat to reason, that urgency be tempered with patience, and that emotion be filtered through strategy. That's why his tone is never frantic. It's deliberate. It speaks not to just the moment at hand, but to the decade that lies ahead. In this way, he redefines the very nature of assertiveness. Assertiveness doesn't mean confrontation, it means presence. It means stepping into global debates not to echo others, but to introduce a new perspective. And that is what Jaishankar does consistently. He does mimic the voices of power. He offers a sovereign voice with intellectual and moral grounding. That is rare in today's world, where mimicry often replaces originality, and speed is mistaken for strength. He understands that India's rise on the global stage cannot be accomplished through reactionary politics. It must be sculpted through steady engagement, through moments that shift perception and elevate India's position in the geopolitical imagination. And to do that, he doesn't shout. He clarifies. He does antagonize. He positions. It's not about winning debates, it's about shaping narratives and, more importantly, shaping outcomes. And shaping outcomes takes more than charisma. It takes command. This command is intellectual, emotional, and strategic. When he walks into a room of diplomats, he carries with him not just India's voice, but India's aspirations, India's responsibilities, and India's dignity. His articulation reflects that burden. He does treat words as tools for persuasion alone, but as instruments of vision. His language is clear, not because simplicity is easier, but because clarity is harder and more essential. In a world filled with ambiguity, clarity becomes power. Dimming also allows him to disarm opposition without direct confrontation. By introducing India's views at moments of global uncertainty, he gives those views disproportionate relevance. When others hesitate, he asserts. When others overreact, he balances. And in the subtle dance of diplomacy, influence is not seized, it's earned. This is what makes Jaishankar not just a participant in global discourse, but a driver of it. His words ripple, not because they're loud, but because they're deeply placed and precisely delivered. His rhetorical strategy also reflects deep awareness of psychology. He speaks not just to the media or to governments, he speaks to audiences' subconscious assumptions about India. He knows that much of global perception is not based on policy, but on outdated narratives. So when he talks, he rewrites those narratives, brick by brick, replacing them with evidence, logic, and a calm certainty. And because he doesn't sound like he's trying to impress, he becomes impossible to ignore. This presence is amplified by his refusal to chase popularity. He is not performing as informing. He is not trying to be liked as trying to be clear. That alone gives him a moral upper hand in many situations. While others campaign for validation, he builds foundations for influence. While others debate for the camera, he frames principles for the future. That difference is not just stylistic, it's strategic, and it's effective. He understands, too, that diplomacy is cumulative. Each appearance, each interview, each statement adds to a body of work that collectively defines India's posture. And so nothing is wasted. Every phrase adds brickwork to a stronger wall of credibility. And every silence, too, adds gravity, because in his leadership style, silence is not absence. It's anticipation. It signals that something meaningful is being prepared. And when it finally arrives, it lands with the weight of a message that has matured in reflection, not reaction. Jaishanker's biggest strength is his ability to play both long game and short game. He doesn't just react to what is in front of him. He prepares for what's coming 5 moves later. That's the mindset of a global strategist. In a world where most leaders are stuck solving today's crisis, Jaishankar is silently shaping tomorrow's advantage for India. It's not always loud, but it's always deliberate. True leadership is defined not by how one handles the moment, but how one prepares for the moments yet to come. Jaishanker's approach to diplomacy is the embodiment of this philosophy. He recognizes that the global landscape is not a series of isolated events, but a flowing river of interconnected trends. While many politicians operate from headline to headline, he sees the broader canvas. That's why his responses often seem understated at first, because they are designed not for today's applause, but for tomorrow's impact. When tensions rise globally, whether it's trade wars, shifting alliances, or security crises, many leaders scramble for immediate responses. They draft reactive policies, offer strong rhetoric, and rush into damage control. But Jaishankar moves differently. He observes. He studies the pattern. He consults deeply. Then, he intervenes with precision. He understands the stakes not just from India's point of view, but from the point of view of every actor on the board. This gives him a panoramic advantage. He isn't just playing India's game, he's mastering the board itself. In this way, he embodies the essence of the long game. It's about building leverage slowly, establishing credibility consistently, and choosing the right moments to assert influence. He knows that sudden gains often collapse quickly, but influence built over time, brick by brick, relationship by relationship, principle by principle, becomes unshakable. He invests in those foundational relationships, not just with countries, but with institutions, communities, and future decision makers. At the same time, he doesn't ignore the short game. He knows that perception drives momentum. Every small win in a negotiation, every sharp rebuttal in an interview, every moment of clarity in chaos, these are the tools of short-term dominance. He uses them not as ends in themselves, but as tactical victories within a longer vision. It's like a grandmaster sacrificing a pawn not to win the next move, but to trap the queen 5 moves later. Jaishanker's ability to juggle these timelines is what makes his leadership rare. He understands that India's rise must be protected from both external disruption and internal distraction. For that, the country needs a steady hand at the wheel, someone who doesn't panic under pressure, someone who can distinguish noise from signal. That's why, when Western narratives attempt to box India into simplistic binaries, East vs. West aligned vs. non-aligned, liberal vs. conservative, Jaishankar doesn't flinch. He calmly redefines the terms of engagement. He asserts India's identity, not as a follower in global affairs, but as a sovereign center of gravity. This isn't just intellectual posturing. It's practical statecraft. He challenges frameworks that no longer serve global balance. He questions inherited assumptions with evidence. And in doing so, he forces the world to stop and think. That pause, that moment of reassessment, is where long-term influence is born. It's the point where yesterday's assumptions begin to dissolve, and a new strategic reality starts taking shape. Another part of his genius lies in his refusal to be rushed. In a media landscape built on speed, he resists the pressure to comment prematurely. He does chase headlines. He shapes them. And sometimes, the most powerful message is the one delivered after everyone else has exhausted their breath. When the dust settles, his voice cuts through not because it's louder, but because it carries the weight of reflection. That discipline to weigh, to measure, to calibrate, is what separates strategy from showmanship. But strategy alone isn't enough. Execution matters. And that's where his diplomatic muscle shows. He doesn't just talk about reforming global institutions, he engages with them. He doesn't just critique outdated narratives, he offers alternatives. He is not afraid to ruffle feathers in service of India's interest, but he does it with such intellectual grounding that disagreement becomes difficult. Even critics have to respect the depth of his reasoning. In negotiations, his demeanor is both firm and respectful. He does escalate unnecessarily, but he never concedes lightly either. He brings facts to the table. He calls out hypocrisy when needed, but he also leaves room for collaboration. That delicate balance between pressure and poise is what earns India both respect and results. He understands that in diplomacy, relationships matter just as much as outcomes. And preserving those relationships, while pushing India's interests, is a skill few possess. To avoid common traps, he does overpromise. He does let emotion cloud analysis. He does chase validation from the West or deference from the East. His compass is calibrated by India's sovereign interests, not by media trends or diplomatic fashion. That internal clarity allows him to navigate external chaos with calm confidence. Perhaps the most underappreciated aspect of his approach is his understanding of timing as a force multiplier. Saying the right thing at the wrong time is ineffective, but saying the right thing at the perfect moment can alter the trajectory of a debate, a negotiation, or even a relationship between nations. Jaishankar knows when to be visible and when to step back. He knows when to speak and when silence says more. That rhythm, that pulse of diplomacy, is something you can't teach. It's something you master through intuition and by experience. It's this mastery that makes him a rare force on the global stage. While many leaders treat diplomacy as a performance, Jaishankar treats it as a craft. He shapes policy like an architect with structure, patience, and purpose. And because he does not seek personal glory, his moves are often missed in the moment, but become impossible to ignore in hindsight. The world realizes, often too late, that he was reacting, he was building. Highly, deliberately, strategically. This is why, when crisis hit, his voice rises not with panic, but with authority. Because while others were focused on today, he was preparing for tomorrow. That preparation is what allows him to think clearly when others are overwhelmed. It's what allows him to spot opportunities amid chaos. It's what enables him to turn setbacks into leverage. And it's what positions India, time and again, as a player that can't be ignored, and a partner that can't be underestimated. This is the kind of leadership the world remembers, not just for its moments, but for its movements. When confidence is not a mask, but a manifestation of preparation. When clarity isn't a script, but a natural extension of one's purpose. And when vision and timing are not afterthoughts, but foundational strategies. A nation does not merely survive the global stage, it reshapes it. This is what India is doing today. Not by echoing the powers of yesterday, but by crafting a voice that belongs entirely to tomorrow. In an era where perception often outweighs truth, where noise is mistaken for influence, and where rapid reaction is mistaken for real strength, India's diplomatic path underlines a different narrative, one that proves calm can be more commanding than chaos, that precision can be more powerful than provocation. When Jaishankar stands before the world, what you see is not a performance. It is a presence, one shaped by discipline, backed by knowledge, and guided by an unwavering belief in the nation he represents. This isn't just about one man or one moment. It is about a model of leadership that refuses to play by outdated rules, that sees diplomacy not as submission or defiance, but as strategy. It is about a nation coming into its own voice, not louder, but clearer, not faster, but smarter, not reactive, but decisive. And in that voice, the world begins to hear something new, not just India speaking, but India leading. So let this be a call not just to admire leadership from afar, but to cultivate it within. To understand that true strength lies in restraint, that real clarity is born from conviction, and that lasting success is written by those who choose their moments and their words with care. Because in the end, history doesn't remember the noisiest rooms. It remembers the ones that changed direction, moved hearts, and stood their ground when it mattered most.